Hi, everybody. I see a lot of familiar faces, but want to go ahead and introduce myself and the Sosby group for those of you who may be new. So I am Virginia. I am with the Sosby group Beyond Good Ideas Foundation. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Beyond Good Ideas Foundation, we're the Sosby group's nonprofit arm, and our main goal, our main mission is to build the capacity and build the experience of future leaders in the social sector. So part of those goals is to introduce future leaders to current leaders in the social sector, current change makers, through our social change career series. So we're really excited to have with us today Miss Sarah Sosbe. She is a principal of a New York City school, and it's a K-8 school. And I'm super excited to have her here with us today because it is such a transformative time in education. I think who better than to talk to Ms. Sosbe today about how she's been able to adapt and lead her team during this time, and to provide advice for our future leaders in the field. I know we have many leaders today who are interested in working with youth. So with that, welcome, Ms. Sosbe. And if I could just have you introduce yourself. I'm going to go ahead and ask some questions, and then please start thinking, members in the audience, of some questions you might want to ask Ms. Sosbe at the end. We'll have some time for Q&A. So Ms. Sosbe, please just give us a little bit of an overview of yourself and your career journey and what has led you to this point.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to meet you all. I'm sure that you guys are in different time zones, right? So it's 3 o'clock here in New York. I'm still at work. So if you hear the radio or the announcements, it's just I'm still in the school building because we just kind of wrapped up our day, but we have after school programming and things going on. So thank you so much for coming into this space. I never really think that there's that much terribly remarkable about, my career journey and the work that I do, other than I get every day to do work with kids and for kids, right? And that holds kind of a near and dear place in my heart. When I was growing up, I actually grew up out west in Colorado. My intention was to be a lawyer. I was going to go to law school, and I was going to get a dual degree in law and in social work, because I was going to be a child advocacy attorney. I just had gotten very concerned with kids don't have a voice and people don't listen to kids, and there's lots of things that happen to kids and they need somebody to be there for them. My dad and my stepmother engaged in foster care, and so I got a look at the foster care system, the good and bad, while I was in high school and while I was in college, and that really kind of reaffirmed that's what I wanted to do. But the universe tends to have other plans. And when I was graduating college, I was looking for jobs, right? I wasn't quite ready to jump right into law school because that's a hefty bill. And I was looking for jobs that would get me moved out east to establish residency and get me closer to the law school I wanted to be. And a friend had mentioned Teach for America. So I never heard of that. And I was kind of like, ugh, kids all day, like that's a lot. But the more I read about the program and its mission, it really aligned with the direction I wanted to go. And I told myself, this is a good opportunity to really get an understanding on the ground floor of what's going on with kids and families to better be able to do the job that I had intended to do. So I got into Teach for America, and I got assigned to the Bronx, which was a lot because I have no family here. I'd never been here before. So it was, my parents were kind of like, what? But I decided to take the leap and try it. And I'm really glad that I did. Through the program, I was able to get my master's in teaching at Fordham University. And I ended up liking teaching so much that I wanted to stay beyond the 2-year commitment. So in Teach for America, you give your 2 years, and you get an education award, and then you can make a decision what you want to do. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought. But I also think it's because my students roped me into staying because their younger sibling was coming. I was a middle school teacher. And so they were like, but miss, my younger brother, he's coming into sixth grade. You can't leave. And so, yeah, I'm definitely a sucker for the kids. So I stayed. And I'm glad that I stayed because I got leadership roles as a teacher. So I was a team leader. I ended up being a lead on the literacy team. And then that actually afforded me the opportunity. I got invited to come back to Teach for America after about 5 years teaching to be a teacher trainer. So I had 3 summers where I was responsible for training brand new, fresh out there teachers. So it was about 60 teachers each summer and kind of training them through everything around classroom management to lesson planning to talking to parents to everything. That was a great opportunity because it actually strengthened me as a teacher. So I would do this work in the summer, be trained as a facilitator and a coach. And then when I would return to my classroom in the fall, it changed the way I was teaching just because of what I was learning being a coach and a facilitator. So I continued to do that work. I got more leadership roles in my school. I became a literacy coach. I headed up different initiatives. So it was just every time, I still had law school there, but then an opportunity would happen, right? And I'm a fan of if an opportunity comes knocking, it doesn't hurt to try because you never know what you could learn from that. One of the opportunities that came was the school that I was in was partnered with Fordham University. And so they were running a program where you could get your master's in administration and supervision. So it was a special cohort. There was only 15 of us in it. And we did a 2 years master's within 1 year. So it was very grueling and it was a lot, but we learned a lot and had a really good experience with that. So after I'd done that, that's when I felt like I was getting a little disillusioned with public school because public school has different sets of rules than the private sector, right? And I had kind of gotten to this point. It was like my 7th, 8th year teaching. And I don't have anything against unions, right? What was happening in my school was the particular person who was the leader of our chapter was not necessarily in it for the best interests of kids. And that became very difficult for me. The things that this person was standing for. And I didn't understand as a young teacher, like, how can the union be like this? They're taking my money every paycheck to pay dues, but this isn't the way that I think we should be doing things for kids. So I decided, let me try Charter World to just see what does that side of it look like, right? And I happened to have known someone that worked at Harlem Children's Zone. And so I'd gone to visit and I'd met the principal and they offered me a job. So I figured, I've read the Jeffrey Canada book, like I followed that whole program. So I went to go work at Promise Academy in Harlem. There it was great because definitely got to see a different way of doing business. Charter World is definitely very different than public school world, but for all of its benefits, there was faults, right? So it was kind of an equal thing looking at public school. I did that for a couple of years and trying to think about, like, did I want to stay long term? Did I want to come back to the city? And then that's when I had gotten an offer to come back to the Department of Education because there are some folks that I knew in different departments and had been offered to become, it's called Teacher Development and Evaluation Coach. There's a department here in the Department of Ed called Office of Teaching and Learning, and they oversee all the professional development, the support, the curriculum, the resources, everything for all educators across the city. One of the departments that they had created, which was new, since, what was it? There's this great article in the New York Times. There was a teacher evaluation law passed in New York State in around like 2011, 2012. And so the New York Times wrote this great article about how the last time teacher evaluation was discussed in New York City was an article they found in their archives from 1922. Right? So that just is astounding that, like, oh my God, like teachers have the most impact on children, but this big city hasn't discussed it or had a uniform process for evaluating teachers. So this particular position was part of this new law that said that principals and APs had to be properly trained and prepared to do the observation process, right? And that was something that I thought was really great about this law, because something that happens, and it happens now, a lot of things often are just thrown at you as a school leader. Read this guide and do it, right? And digest it. So this was a great thing that there was actually this role created to provide PD and support. So that way, this evaluation of teachers was done in a way that was meaningful, that was consistent, and was about supporting student achievement. So I was offered the job, and so I came back into the city, and I worked for a district. So I supported 39 principals and 75 assistant principals, and I was responsible for training them on how to evaluate, observe, and coach their teachers. So that was an awesome experience. I got to see classrooms K-12, all different subjects, and again, just information taking in to kind of strengthen my own practice, right? I also got to see 39 different styles of leadership and how to run a school building, right? And that was invaluable, because not every style works for every single situation. So it was definitely a great learning to see the variety and kind of, say like, wow, like when so-and-so did this, it went over great. Like, let me keep that in my mind, right? Or wow, so-and-so tried this way, it didn't really go, right? So just really learning from that. I spent about 4 or 5 years doing that work. And what was great working for the superintendent is, besides that work, I was also allowed to get involved in other pieces. So I ran our teacher tenure process for the district. I coordinated a grant that we had with the New York Historical Society. So there's a lot of other facets that she allowed me to be a part of and to manage for the district. So it was a great experience. I then eventually moved back into a school role because there was a school that I was specifically providing support to, that I'd been visiting, and it was a school that I'd always felt like kind of got the short end of the stick, so to speak. It was one of our middle schools in Hunts Point, and the Hunts Point area of the Bronx is one of the lowest socioeconomic areas in the country. The average income is 21,000, which is crazy low for New York City when you think about the rents and the cost of living here. So just having some intense issues going on in that neighborhood. And unfortunately, some of the schools in that neighborhood kind of became these places where, well, just go there. Nobody really pays attention to what you're doing because nobody really cares what's happening back there. So it was always a school that kind of had my heart, that it just needed some new leadership. We were able to work and get a master principal in the school, and he happened to be a principal that I worked with very closely. And I was doing so much work with him that we then made the decision that I would join him as his assistant principal. So we did a lot of amazing work. We saved the school from closure. We completely turned it around. We turned over 90% of the staff. Just, it's a whole different place now, which is awesome. We had this whole big 5-year plan, and then I got a call from the executive soup of the Bronx who had said, oh, I'd heard about you, I want to meet you. And then that led to being offered a principalship, which was a hard decision because, we had big plans for my little middle school in Hunts Point, but it was definitely an opportunity. It was a really good opportunity to kind of step into this new role and really try to enact some of these things that I'd learned from these other school leaders. So I actually became a principal last year in September. So I got like 4 or 5 good months in my building, and then COVID happened. So it's been a very interesting journey as a new principal because it's just not typical, and I have to keep reminding myself that because I'm new and I'm learning things, but then because of COVID, there's a bunch of other new things that everybody is trying to learn, right? Like before COVID, I could call somebody and say, okay, I'm trying to figure out how to do da-da-da with the budget. Like, what did you do? But now it's the situation that this is all new for everybody. So it's been kind of, there's been good and bad to it. but you know, I'm making the most of it. My kids are amazing. I have 470 kitties, K-8, and they're doing what they need to do, and my teachers are doing what they need to do, and trying to, you know, truck through this whole year. But it's everybody keeps telling me, like, you give it a few years, and when I reflect, it'll just be, you know, I'm not in that reflective place yet because we're still trying to figure out, you know, how are we supposed to do state testing? Because that's been the big announcement. So that's been my journey that kind of ended me up here in this little office here with you guys.
Well, that's a great segue into my next question. As I've shared with you and before, I am a program manager for, in addition to my role with Sishi, I'm a program manager for a youth development after school program where we work intimately with a school site and the principal of the school. She's actually a new principal of the school during this time as well. And we've witnessed firsthand how challenging it has been for schools, for leaders, for teachers. And I'm just curious if you can elaborate more on your experience being a new principal and then COVID happening. How did you adapt to such a rapidly changing environment? What were some successes as you led your team, not just of teachers and school administrators and staff, but also parents, students? And what were some challenges you had or still might be experiencing as a leader during this time?
Yeah. It's definitely been interesting. It happened so fast last year. And it was particularly like, it was a little frightening in the beginning, right? Mainly because the school that I'm at, the school was built in 1994, right? And the vast majority of the staff have been here for 15 plus years. And for some, this is the only school they've ever taught in, which is great, right? But I'm also a fan of experience, right? And sometimes it just gives you perspective. And so one of the things that was missing here was technology, which was just fascinating to me because the school I had come from, we were a multimedia school. So we had a Promethean board in every room. It was one-to-one technology for every staff, every student. We were doing all these digital, this was pre-COVID, doing all these digital things. And then I came here, you know, and I would walk into classrooms and instead of using the smart board, it was like covered up with a picture. And I was told, well, no, this one doesn't believe in that. I was like, believe in it? But it's like 2019. Like, what do you mean believe in it? So for me, that was the most stressful piece is like, how the heck am I supposed to take a school online that really just doesn't do it? And so it was just kind of troubleshooting things to do and how to get around it. So we went on a tear. The DOE was providing Wi-Fi enabled iPads. So we just did massive outreach to all the families. And I was like, apply for an iPad. That's all I've got, right? I've got 50 laptops for a school of 500 kids, right? Like this is all we can do right now to get technology in your hands. And God love my parents, they did. So 380 of my kids have DOE iPads. And so that was a big thing. So just kind of looking at like, if I don't have the resource, where is a place that I can get the resource or just tap into a department or a person who can get us the thing that we need. I also spent a lot of time setting up professional development and even running it myself because I was familiar with certain digital tools and resources that I had used when I was a classroom teacher. So I would run a lot of workshops for my teachers, just kind of show them how to use a tool. And so that was one of the ways to, at least in the beginning, kind of address it. The spring was hard. I lost a teacher. So one of my teachers did pass from COVID in April, it's hard. But as a new principal, it was a lot to figure out how do you manage through this, particularly because I had never even experienced that as a teacher, losing a staff member, right? So even just as a staff member, I had never gone through that kind of process. So we had kind of this extra piece to kind of work through and figure out our community, but also we still got to teach, right? Like there's still school tomorrow, there's still this, there's still that. So there was a lot of moving parts and we learned a lot and took a lot of that into this particular school year. I think that the one place that I'm doing well is managing the resources and the information. We have a lot of stuff in like Google and OneDrive. I send, 1 to 2 email blasts to the parents, which they're loving, just knowing exactly what's going on and what's happening and all of this. I do, which is something I did even last year, I do a monthly coffee with the principal and a monthly tea with the principal. And it's literally an hour block of time where I'm just there. There's no agenda. And we just talk and they can ask me questions. They can give me feedback. We share ideas. And so I kept those up as well. And that's been helpful just to get feedback because, often teachers see things one way, students see things one way, but the parent sees it this third way, right? And so it's really important to get feedback from all the different stakeholders and then just kind of triangulate that to figure out like, wow, all 3 groups mentioned the same thing. We need to take care of this right now, right? So that's been helpful. The other piece is, and I don't know if it's necessarily COVID or just one of the areas that I had to grow quite a bit in is really holding people accountable and having very clear and very high expectations, right? You kind of go into a space, you get caught up in like, you want people to like you want people to not be upset with the decisions you make. But in this particular role, I've discovered, wow, I'm the supervisor, right? Like it's my job to tell this person, you can't come to school an hour late. It's unacceptable, right? And I've got to let go of that other stuff, right? So that's definitely something I've been more clear and more firm around that. And so those are the areas that we've had some successes. We've continued to have teacher teams virtually. We've continued to have our collaborations going and we've been able to kind of bring in new programs. So even despite COVID, those have been some areas that have been successful. The things that are challenging, and I'm sure this would be true for any supervisor, right? It's really hard to take the complaints, particularly when the complaints are out of your control, right? Like I had a parent today who was really upset and was, this isn't right. The kids should just be in the building. I understand, but that's not my choice. This is the rules for social distancing. I can only fit so many kids. So those are the things that's hard because as a principal, you're supposed to make peace and make parents happy and make students happy and make staff happy. But there's many things that are out of my control. They're not my decision. Parents get upset when we have to close the building, when we have a positive COVID case. And I have to explain to them every time, this is the protocol the city has. This is just what happens. I apologize, but this is what it is. But there are some parents convinced that it's me just deciding to close the school and, I just kind of got to live with it and move on. The other piece that's been a bit of a struggle, and I feel like this is probably a struggle with anyone in kind of a service type role, it's a struggle balancing student needs to staff needs, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm in a school, right? And the whole reason all the adults are here is because it's a school, right? To educate children. And so there are times where staff are asking for certain things that kind of go beyond the scope of us being here about kids, right? And so that's also an area because, I get COVID is hard and I get that it's a struggle, but there have been a few employees who've taken advantage of that, right? And tried to use the pandemic as an excuse for not doing their basic job. And so that is something, particularly in, my plight to be this child advocate, it's hard to swallow sometimes, right? And it's not something you wouldn't hope to get that out of an educator. But that's been a piece that it's definitely been an interesting piece to kind of manage, particularly, about 70% of my staff are in accommodations to work from home. So my building is full of substitutes who are working with the in-person kids. So it just makes it a different kind of layer of supervision. So because it feels like I'm running 2 schools. you know, and you want to trust that people who are working from home are honestly working from home. But there have been a few times where we've not found a person where they were supposed to be. And that was a difficult conversation, but it was a conversation that needed to be had because at the end of the day, we should all be here about kids.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear what skills you think as a leader in your position are essential in order to be effective, specifically because I myself, have difficulty as a manager having those difficult conversations with
Right.
staff. I think members in the audience can probably relate to that if they've held managerial positions, or they can expect that it will happen at some point in their career. So if you could elaborate on what skills, and going back to your original statement in the beginning where you talked about some leadership styles even that you found effective. And if you could just elaborate how do you communicate? How do you hold people accountable? How do you communicate your expectations? And how do you have those difficult conversations?
Yeah. Um, I think it's really important for somebody in a leadership role, like when you have to, you have to be optimistic, right? Like I think it's hard if you always go into situations with like a pessimistic viewpoint, because I think, at least for me, I know it would automatically make me start to feel disappointed with people, right? Versus like, let me at least look at the person with the glasses half full, right? Like they made a mistake, but let me like they're here for the best interest of kids, right? Like let me start from that perspective because I think it helps keep in check like my tone and my approach in many cases. I think it's important to have a growth mindset attitude, right? There's been a lot of mistakes that I've made and I own up to it. You know, I'm like, I made a mistake. I didn't know. Let me learn. Let me get this. I think it's also important time management and multitasking is really key. Just because, you know, it was definitely a huge transition from AP to principal because as AP, I just oversaw the ELA team, the ENL team, the after school program, and a couple of our initiatives, right? But now I sign off on everything, right? So it's kind of crazy the different pieces I have to keep control of. And so the one thing I found that has been the most helpful is putting things in writing, right? I didn't really realize the importance of that because even just putting things in writing, it just clarifies intent if it wasn't clear in the conversation, right? And it also, putting it in writing somehow makes it a different kind of commitment for both parties. It doesn't just become this kind of conversation we had, but it becomes, okay, thank you for meeting with me. As per our conversation, these are our next steps, right? Because then it allows that accountability piece to happen more seamlessly, right? Because it's things that you're able to refer to. We met on this day, we discussed, I sent an email here to follow up, we agreed, right? You had these opportunities to speak up if you needed help. You didn't, you've missed the deadline. Now we're at this different conversation. So that has really helped in many of these difficult conversations, is really having this paper trail to be able to show the opportunities provided, the meetings had, etc. What's also helped is I've done practice conversations. I have a leadership coach. So New York City gives all new principals a leadership coach. And my deputy superintendent is awesome. And she's even helped. And we literally role play. And that was super helpful, particularly because a couple of these difficult conversations were with staff members who don't always have the best tone, right? And so if you already know that going into a conversation, it makes you a little trepidatious to even engage with the person. And so doing the role play is helpful. So I would definitely suggest that as a tactic, is sometimes just practicing how you want to respond to something or how you want to say it just gives you a little bit more confidence in the actual moment of it. And so that's really kind of the skills, that and being self-reflective, right? I think it's always important that if something goes wrong or something goes awry, is to just stop and ask yourself, okay, well, what were my steps? is there anything I could have done differently? Is there a different resource I could have used? Is there somebody else I could have pulled in before going right away to other people? Right? Is just wanting to be able to say in a team, okay, this didn't go over so well. Upon reflection, I realized I could have done A and B, but C is a team thing. So we need to think about how to do this differently next time. So that self-reflection piece, I think, is really important for anyone in a leadership role. It's also good modeling, right? I encourage my staff all the time, and I even do this with the kids, right? Well, let's think about what you did. Was that the right thing? Was it the wrong thing? Like, what could you have done differently? And so just really getting that, because the more you can get the person to verbalize their next steps, the more likely they are to actually do them. And that's the ultimate goal, the ultimate aim.
Yeah, so many great tips in there. And you're right, you can plan and prepare, but really practicing those conversations is really, and allowing yourself the opportunity to have those conversations is really what's going to make you excel at them over time. When we first met, you had mentioned that you've worked with social workers in the school system throughout your career. You've worked with social work interns. We have a lot of social work interns in the audience today. Could you elaborate more for members of the audience who are thinking about their next step after they graduate? What opportunities are there for individuals who want to work in social services or social work after graduation in the school system?
There are, social workers are great. I'm not sure what it is, state by state or district to district, but in New York City, every school has a social worker. And it's part of what's called the crisis team. So every school creates a crisis team, which is usually the social worker, the school psychologist, the guidance counselor, maybe an administrator. And it's in the event there's a crisis, right? Like a student has expressed suicide ideation, a student's home has burned down. Like, so when a crisis situation hits, you have this crisis team, and they determine kind of the supports and who's going to do the contact and whatnot, right? So on my crisis team, my social worker is there, and what she's been helpful, besides her particular caseload connected to like the IEP process and things like that, when we have some of our kids, they're depressed, right? This is hard to sit at a computer and just not see your friends and not do that, right? And so our teachers are great that if a kid kind of starts to indicate these feelings or is being upset. We had one student, unfortunately, their apartment building caught on fire right before Christmas, and so they were going through a lot. So she's able to provide crisis counseling, which has been really helpful, because typically counseling services provided to students who have an IEP, an individualized education plan, that this evaluation has shown that the student needs counseling. But through the crisis team, that's one of the things the social worker is able to provide, is this, at-risk counseling, which is, a shorter period of time. It's not mandated counseling, but it's to help support the child with the particular traumatic issue that they're going through. There are schools, so when I was in AP, my counterpart AP, he was a social worker. So he was not a teacher, he was a social worker. And he works at Fordham University, and he now teaches classes. So at my other school, he brought in social work interns. So we had about 12 to 15 social work interns at that school. And so they did such things. They got divided up and they had a caseload. So they would have, 3 to 4 kids, and they would meet with them, 2 to 3 times a week. They would set up group sessions. So different things to allow them to practice those things that they were learning in their social work program. I've signed my school up currently for a program with Child's Mind Institute. And so I'm getting some more clinicians, a couple more social workers who I was able to recommend about 10 to 15 kids to get these counseling services. So kind of group services that would provide them with strategies and tools that would allow them to kind of continue to engage through this pandemic and cope with different things. So that's going to be really exciting. So those are some of the ways that we here in New York City engage with social workers. So it's definitely something kind of looking at where you are. If a social worker is part of what can be on a school-based staff, that's definitely something. And it's definitely something I encourage social workers to take advantage of, because the school environment is very unique, right? And we tend to learn things about the kids being here in school that may not necessarily be as easy to learn just making a home visit, right? Or just hoping that the family shows up to the clinic for their particular services. And it's just being able to see the kids in a different environment just gives some insight, a little bit more insight into their needs and what's going on, right? And it's definitely something, if you want to be a social worker that supports children, I would definitely encourage that, right? Because the school day, I mean, when I was getting my teaching master's, we read an article that, kids spend more of their waking time with teachers than they do anybody else, right? Because if you think about the length of the school day, then by the time the kid gets home, they might do a little homework, it's dinner, and then you go to bed, right? And so 5 days out of the week, most of their awake time is functioning in school. So if in this vein of being a social worker, you want to do work with kids, that's what I would definitely encourage, is just, in your community, just kind of look and see what kind of roles do they have for social workers in schools.
Wow, I didn't realize that there were so many opportunities, and that's great advice. Thank you. So I was reading your bio that you shared with me, and I noticed, based on the various initiatives that you're involved in, and from your track, right, you wanted to be an attorney, and but education kind of stuck. So it seems like education is not really just a job; it's your passion.
Yeah.
How do you feel that your work makes a difference for social issues or for social good?
Well, I mean, I like to think that it does. Well, mainly because, when I was a teacher, I was very taken aback by how different my educational upbringing in Colorado was compared to my kids in the Bronx, right? Like it was just very starkly different, right? And so I just remember thinking like, wow, I had so many opportunities and so many, we went on trips, we had field trips, we had all these different things that I had access to. And it was simply because luck of the draw, the parents I was born to, this is where they chose to live, right? And so coming to the Bronx and just seeing the inequity, the disproportionality, and not, it was really mind blowing, because you have these images of New York City as this like very rich, vast city with all these opportunities and all this stuff. And it's not equally distributed at all. So when I was a teacher, and it may have been for self-serving reasons. When you're a teacher, you get everything for free here, right? So I was like brand new to New York City, and I was like, what? I can take the kids to the museum for free. I can take them to the show for free. So I became like super excited about field trips, right? Because we get a subway pass, we're on the subway, we're out. So through that, I exposed my kids to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We went to plays at Times Square. We went to Shakespeare shows down in the Village. Like we did all sorts of things. And for many of my kids, that was their first exposure. My first year teaching, one of my students told me that our first trip into the city, that was the first time she had left the Bronx, right? Her parents were immigrants and were not, they just weren't comfortable at the moment, expanding out further than their area. But they also didn't have the funds, right? You got to have money to be able to do certain things here in the city. And so that was a big thing for me, that like the more I can expose my students and the more that I can show them what's out there and what they deserve to have access to, they can start to broaden their horizons. So I'm definitely like, I have, former students now. One student, he got a full ride to University of Vermont. and he's a lab technician in a hospital. I have another student, she got into Teach for America and has been teaching out in LA. So it's just nice to see that their world got broadened a little bit, right? That they didn't have to kind of accept the stereotype of the Bronx and the low expectations that people tended to have for them. So for me, that's really how I'm still doing that work that I had intended to do when I was younger. And then definitely the work I did at the district level, just that bigger impact overall, and really pushing school leaders around conversations around equity, right? Like, do you really feel that was highly effective? Do you really feel it was right what that teacher said to the kids? Was that really the best way to get that across? So just pushing that is my way, in a different way from going to law school, to still advocate for kids and still give them that voice. You know, I'm proud to be a Bronx educator. I've been doing this now for 17 years, and all but 2 of those years were here in the Bronx. And I'm proud of that, and proud to contribute to it, because there's so many wonderful things going on in this borough, and so many wonderful things happening with the kids, that they deserve the same opportunities and access that all the kids do in the city. You know, it shouldn't just be the circumstance of their zip code.
Right, and talk about social impact, broadening the horizons of our future generation is probably the most impactful when you think about it. What's one piece of advice that you would give somebody looking to work in this field?
You have to have patience. So my job, because it was funny, because like in the questions you'd emailed ahead of time, like what's your typical day? Well, it's never quite typical. Like, you can go in with a plan, but you know, if a kid gets sick, or you know, you get like a surprise meeting added to your calendar. So I would definitely say patience, and patience mainly because working in education is extremely unique, right? Because you're dealing with humans all the time, right? It's not sitting at a computer. It's not doing research, you know, reading a book, and then it's dealing with humans, and humans just have this other layer of emotions that always feed into things, right? And so it's really important to have patience. It's important to have an open mind, because things happen, you know, it's just, you know, the start of the year, I did not think I would be as comfortable with all these new COVID things as I am now, right? Like, okay, yeah, we do COVID testing every week. It just happens, right? But in the beginning, you're kind of like, oh my God, what is this? So that would be it. And the other piece that I would say is being open to feedback, because even managers, even supervisors have to get feedback, right? Nobody is perfect. Nobody is 100%. And you can't expect your employees to take your feedback if you're not willing to take some yourself, and just be reflective in your work and in your role.
Yeah. And I love that you go ahead and proactively have those monthly one-on-one meetings or monthly group meetings with parents, because I can imagine that they can get a little heated, but I think that, you know, they probably appreciate having the opportunity to speak openly. And so that's definitely great advice, that 360 feedback. Absolutely. I want to pause here. Well, I guess I do have time for the last question, and you jumped ahead. What your typical day looks like, or your typical week or month? We haven't gotten into that. I can imagine, though. Yeah, you probably walk into the office with a to-do list, and then get a million calls and pulled into a million meetings. So, what
The
does
only
a
thing
typical
that
day look like?
helps is like, I have standing meetings, right? And then I plug all of that into my calendar. So every morning I have a check-in at 7:45 so I get to work about 7, just because to get through all the emails, like who's calling out, who is this, what is happening, are we getting a surprise visit, like whatever. So, and I like to, the doors in my building don't open until 7:30. So like 7 to 7:30 is like my quiet to listen to music, be left alone a second, just so I can kind of sort through emails. I mean, I look at emails at night as well, but you guys, you wake up and there's more stuff in that inbox, right? So it's just kind of filtering. I have a check-in with my AP at 7:45, and it's just mainly to go over like, okay, this person's absent. We got to get somebody here. We got to do this. And then at 8 o'clock, I have a check-in with my school aides. And we run down what's going on for the day, right? Like, okay, the COVID testers are coming. So you're going to have to collect the kids, or we got to get more batteries for the thermometers, or such and such books got delivered. We got to get them organized and up to the rooms, right? So we do it every morning. Sometimes it's like a 2-3 minute check-in. Sometimes it's 10 minutes. But what I've done is it's on my calendar. So my secretary knows not to schedule me for stuff. Because what will happen is, teacher's day starts at 8. And so they'll walk in and want to start talking to you and start doing things. But I've realized like I have to honor the time for certain things, or those things don't get done, right? And so I'm really big about putting things in my calendar. I'll even put things in my calendar as like blocking out time if I've got a report that's due, right? Or if I've got to type up the feedback from an observation, I'll actually put that in my calendar. Just recognizing that, granted, it's, being a principal is not all about the paperwork, but sometimes some of that paper needs to get done so the school can continue running in a positive way, right? And so just thinking about my calendar that way to ensure I'm getting tasks done in a timely manner. So there are certain things that, like, I have certain team meetings that happen once a week. There's certain staff development stuff that happens once a month. And so I start plugging things in right away. Even something like I had to register for a principal workshop. It doesn't happen until May, but I put it in my calendar just because things pop up and you won't remember. So that's generally what it is. But, I have those, the day gets going, we screen all the kids coming in, and then I do a morning walkthrough of my whole building. So I go into every room, I say good morning to all the kids, to the teachers, I make sure everybody's doing okay. And then I get started with other tasks. And then it's probably bad, but I try to pick at least one lunch period a day and I go eat with the kids. Because it's just kind of a fun time to talk to them and see how things are going. And do you like the lunch today? Do you want something different? Things like that. And then I do an afternoon walkthrough. I go back through the rooms again, make sure everybody's okay, say hi to the kids, see what they're doing. And then we do dismissal. And so that was something I did even before COVID. So I wanted to make sure to kind of keep up that pattern as well, because I never want to be that principal where the kids aren't sure who the principal is, right? Because they don't really see them so much. So that's also something that I really try to make sure I've got time devoted every day to do the morning rounds, the afternoon rounds, and then I've got the pieces in between.
Yeah, and I wonder, proactively scheduling yourself to make the rounds and to have your check-ins daily, how many fires that might put out, that whereas you didn't have those check-ins, you might have to reactively address a problem or an issue. And so it's interesting. And I like what you said about honoring your own time.
Yes.
my calendar is my Bible.
Things with the check-ins, like, and it was funny too, because I didn't catch it till we started it this year. I would normally like meet with the school aides like during first period, but what's happening was like that didn't work because they were doing the late pass, like there was things happening. So I said, you know what, this is what we're going to do. We're going to meet at 8 before the children come, because nobody's going to bother you if there's no kids in the building. And at least I can let you guys know these are the things that need to happen, because once my day starts, I can't meet with them all the time. And so we found much better success with that. So again, it was just me as a school leader reflecting on like, this is not working for me. This is not working for them. Like what's another way around it? And this has actually been great, right? And I don't stress about what's going on today. I had my district principals conference, so I was on a Zoom all day, but I was not stressed about tasks getting done because I had met with them. And then it was great. We had a bathroom break, but I snuck out to see like, okay, was this, and it was, right? And I was like, okay, this is good. But it was just a matter of just owning up and saying, you know what, this process isn't quite working for us to meet during this time. Like, let's try this and see how it goes.
Right. And that goes back to that flexibility and that self-reflection piece that's so important, getting that feedback.
Yeah.
So we have about 8 minutes left, and I definitely want to give the opportunity to members of the audience to go ahead and ask some questions. Feel free, anyone who might have a question, to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask, or if you want to send it in the chat box as well, that's an option. So let me go ahead and open it up. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Sosby?
Oh, I see a hand.
Hi, Erica. I see you first, so we'll go to you.
Okay. First, I just wanted to say thank you for being passionate about this. I've been struggling this year, and I think a lot of people have been struggling with just feeling like people don't care. So thank you for that, because I needed to see that. Also, I'm in upstate New York, so more power to you for dealing with Huts Point. She deserves a gold medal just for that.
You're familiar, yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah. I'm in Newburgh. I was in Newburgh.
Ah, yes, I'm familiar with Newburgh too, yeah.
Most are. How do you deal with the burnout of dealing with staff, or just any, like, people who are dismissive about things?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Yes, because I got a couple of those. I think it's important, like, I have parameters, right? So I make it very clear to my staff that, after 8 o'clock, if it's not an emergency, I'm not responding to emails, right? Because there's really not much I can do for your lesson plan at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. There's really nothing that I'm going to be able to do, right? If it's an emergency, by all means. But it was to set parameters, because what I was finding was it tended to be the folks that were a little dismissive and didn't really have the best attitude would use it as opportunities to just these rambling, complaining emails, right? That it's like, this isn't moving us in any kind of direction. So that's one thing. The other thing that I've instituted this year is before every staff meeting, every team meeting, we read out the norms. That was something I decided, is I just said, it was interesting coming to this school because, I'm not familiar. I don't know anybody in the school. They didn't know me. So it was coming into like a new family, and I was this person who just showed up on their doorstep. And in reflecting, I didn't like the way they spoke to each other. That maybe had something to do with like the length of time they were together. It kind of developed this maybe a little too closeness that now I feel I can just talk to you anyway. So we have norms, right? And they're school-wide norms, and they're read out loud at the start of every meeting. So that's one thing, just to remind people, like, we're here for good intentions and we're going to treat each other with respect. So that's one thing. The other thing that I tend to do is, in a way that's polite and respectful, like pointing out to the person, have I offended you? Have I done something that's made you feel a way, because your tone is giving me the impression that there's something that's upset you in this process, right? Like, is there something I can do to help you work through this or better understand it? And then there are times that, you just have to point blank tell a staff member, you cannot speak to people like that, right? There is a policy in our school. There's a policy in the city system, that we will treat each other with respect, right? And you may feel a certain way, but crossing that line, it then leads me as a supervisor to take certain disciplinary steps with you. So, I try to give people a chance, try to give them an opportunity to self-correct, right? That whole growth mindset thing. But then if they're still not doing it, reminding myself, you're the supervisor and the buck ends with you, and you've got to let this person know that this is not acceptable, because it's making members of the community not feel safe and not feel comfortable. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Do we have any other questions? We have a few minutes left, maybe time for one more. Okay, perfect. I think we may have covered it all. I do want to mention something from the audience, from Amalia. She said, "Thank you, Ms. Sosby, for being so real, honest, and vulnerable with us. You are truly inspirational. We all can see your passion and commitment, and that as a parent and as a social worker inspires me."
Oh, that was nice. That was nice. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's all the kids. Every time I have a bad day, I go into one of my kindergarten classes and I'm good to go. Right. And just go and talk to my seventh graders. And then you just get reminded like you're doing the good fight for them. Right. Because they just want to come to school and they want to learn. Right. They have very basic needs. And so the least I can do is fight the good fight for them. So yeah, thank you for that.
So true, how just seeing their faces can make you just go on with the day
Yeah.
and remember why we're doing this. I would be remiss, I'm going to take a couple minutes to give a shout out to the Alliance for Positive Youth Development, which is a sister program through the SISG group. The program is focused on raising awareness on issues affecting youth and also providing resources to assist those who are serving youth. I want to mention that we will be having our annual youth summit and Alliance for Positive Youth Development conference coming up in July. We'll be sharing that information on our social media networks. I'll put the social media network information into the chat box. If you want to continue the conversation, if you think of anything else, feel free to email me. You all have my email, or feel free to follow the conversation using the hashtag BGI Careers that I'm going to post into the chat box. I think, oh, we have another comment from Justin. Thank you so much. Great insights. Appreciate you, Ms. Sosby, for taking the time and helping social workers see how they can partner with school staff to help the kiddos.
Yeah.
So that's a great way to sum it up. Thank you all for your attention and for your comments. And a special thanks to Ms. Sosby for being here today and for broadening the horizons of our future leaders in the social sector. I think, you know, we can definitely say that you made an impact here today in helping us think about, you know, where we go in our careers and the kind of impact that we can make. So we really, really appreciate it. I'm going to post the information in the chat box. With that, we will see you soon.
Thanks, guys. Good luck to you guys. Good luck with everything.
Thank you.